Hey, George, I have a crazy idea. Do you want to do a podcast with me?
Well, what kind of podcast? We're going to talk about your dog?
Here's the catch. It's kind of all about me. I mean, my business. I mean, small businesses. But yeah, it's pretty much whatever I want to talk about for my business.
I'm happy to do that, but why me?
You're my brother and I love talking to you. So it's kind of a good excuse to just talk to you more. But, I was realizing the other day, I was talking to some friends about this because I've been talking about wanting to start a podcast because I do better when I think out loud, I'm processing ideas and I'm having thought partnership with somebody. And when you and I talk, the few times when we get to talk, not about nephew Avi, but about business stuff, it's really fun. It's really engaging. Like you're telling me stories of work and I get to bounce my ideas. And I realize I start putting those into the framework of your big corporate experience and my big corporate experience into a small business context. And it's a really fun thought process for me. And that's what made me think of you.
When you tell me about maybe how this thought relates to an entrepreneur's point of view, I find that fascinating because that's really not my point of view. I mean, most of my experience has been with big enterprises. I've been managing a lot. I love talking about management. I love talking about it with you, but I don't have that perspective. These conversations have been really fun for me. So if that's the podcast, I'm in.
That is the podcast. So we're doing it now. It's happening right this moment. I just started recording you in case you didn't know. You're actually now in the podcast. Welcome to The Belief Shift. You've been asking for it, and now we finally have an answer. The Belief Shift Podcast. This show explores what you need to know about building a successful small business. Whether it's your beliefs on success or how exactly to achieve it, no matter the topic, we'll cover everything. So I guess we should probably introduce ourselves to our audience now that we've started this whole thing. So first of all, as we've already said, we are brother and sister. I am a small business owner, but I started out in the corporate world. Well, I will say I actually I've worked for various size consulting companies as a business consultant. And I've also worked internally in a company as a leader, leading teams that were really trying to bring about change and improve performance of the organization. So lots of project management, lean performance improvement, leadership development, yada, yada, yada. All of that experience is what I bring to the table as a small business coach. And I decided to do small business coaching because I realized in big business, they have all these tools and they have all these resources. They've got a VP of strategy who's great at strategy. They got a VP of marketing, great at marketing. And these poor little small business owners, they have to be good at those things too. They have to be good at strategy, at marketing, at all the things. But they don't have an expert to just say, hey, that's that department's job. They got to do all of it. And I realized, wow, they really need some help just getting some of this fundamental stuff understood enough that they can really wear all of those hats. Because as much as they have to be the CEO of their business, they also got to wear the marketing hat and they got to wear the strategy hat and they got to wear the finance hat. And it's a lot of hats. So I just wanted to be able to bring my experience from big business to small business owners so they could feel more comfortable in those hats, because I think they get really uncomfortable in a lot of these spaces because they don't know what they don't know. So I want to close that gap for them, and that they don't have to be experts like in the big business world, but we can get them to just level up even just 1 or 2 clicks from where they are now. And it does make a big difference. As soon as I see people, those light bulbs go off. They gain more confidence. They start making smarter strategic decisions in their business. Their business starts to just more smooth out and take off. And that's what I want to be able to do. That's about me.
Okay. Me, I got a couple of computer science degrees. I started out after school being a software developer, which I loved doing, did that for a while. And I've done it for large and small companies. I've done it for a university, big university. I worked for a 40-person company for a while, and then spent most of my career in large enterprises, like thousands of people, 5 to 25,000 people companies, something like that. I've been a manager for over 20 years, some sort of technical manager. And something I realized about my career is since the very beginning, I've almost always had some sort of collaborative aspect to my job. Like even when I was working at the university, I would get funding from other companies and I would end up working with grad students and myself and other companies since the very beginning. So for some reason, collaboration has been part of my thing. It seems to attract me in jobs and I love it. the further I get in my career, the more I like thinking about management topics and managing people, because I look around and I see so many people don't pay proper attention to it. They really don't. It's just crazy and frustrating. I also feel like I have more, well, like you said, curiosity than most people. So I'm truly interested in the people I work with and understanding them better. And I think if I understand them better, that puts me in a position of trying to want to be a support for them, not the boss of them. And I like that mindset. So I think about these topics all the time and where it goes right and where it goes wrong. And I just love it. So technical manager, I'm really happy with what I do. And really, the further I get into it, I like thinking about how to help people achieve more than they think they can achieve, just by supporting them and helping them discover themselves better. Most of the way I manage, what the feedback I get from the people who report to me or work with me is, man, you ask questions I never really thought of before, or you manage by asking questions. You rarely tell me what to do. If I'm telling you something, you'll usually ask me a question like, is that really what you intend to do? Or how do you think the people you're working with are going to receive this? I'm like, oh yeah, I never thought about that. And then that's how we'll go along. And I'll discover it on myself, but it's from questions that you kicked off. That's me.
The reason that we're having this conversation, I think, is we both think of this as this is a very human endeavor. Like, I know business is business, but it's people to people is what it's all about. It's just all about people. And I think a lot of our conversations are always about that people, that human aspect, and how often businesses just get that wrong. Like, we see it all the time, right? Even the businesses with the best of intentions. I have clients right now who they say one thing and then they're doing another. And I'm like, do you see the disconnect in the type of, culture and business you're trying to create? And then these decisions they're making. And there's lots of reasons why that happens. And we can get into all of that because I think it's important for small business owners to keep an eye on, because they're doing it to themselves. Maybe later, one of our topics can be really about this concept of leadership for small business owners, because I just read an article on Medium that sort of talked about this concept. Maybe we'll pull it in later, but it really got into, it did not say the word leadership and should have, because it was talking about somebody who had gotten burnout in their job. And then, it's like a typical story. And then how they sort of figured that out, that they were overworking themselves and how they came through it and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. There was no discussion about leadership's responsibility in that. There was no discussion about them being a good leader to themselves and learning how to, that's what you have to do. And so this is a huge potential trap for small business owners, is to work themselves to the bone and not be a good leader to themselves. Some of them have been in corporate jobs and they leave, me included, because they got burned out, because they weren't treated well. It wasn't fulfilling anymore. And they were just killing themselves for something that didn't give them the same return that they were putting into it. Right. And so it just starts to suck the life out of you, and you just start to give more than you should. Business owners who come from that environment are at risk of now doing that to themselves, because it's all they know. And so they treat themselves this horrible way that their past company treated them, and they don't even realize they're doing it, but they've just put themselves in that same trap. And so I always love this concept of, how do you be the best leader to yourself? By setting up proper expectations and boundaries, and knowing what success looks like, and doing check-ins with yourself, and having goals, all of those things that a good leader would do. So I think that's a place where you and I align in a big way. And as a common thread, that'll be throughout this whole podcast discussion, is humanizing every aspect of business. Because without that, we just become cogs in our own little business machines. I watch people do it and they just get miserable and they just want to jump out of their business. Some of them are like, I think I just need to go back and get a job. Oof. I'm like, what? But because they just recreated the thing that they had. And they're like, well, if I'm going to do this, I might as well do it with somebody else telling me what to do. Yeah. We want to avoid
that's heartbreaking.
That. Yes. So if any of you listeners out there have had that moment where you've hesitated and you've thought, I don't know if this small business thing is for me. Maybe I should get out. Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I'm not cut out for it. Stick around, because we have ways to help you not give up, to have you not feel like you have to, burn the candles at both ends to make it happen.
It's not like it's your first time having done this. You've done this a bunch. Right? Mm-hmm. We're going to talk about examples. people you have helped work through this, concrete examples actually have happened?
Actual examples and clients who are right now in that space, right? Because we go through cycles of it too. This isn't an easy choice to be a small business owner, but you can do things. There are smarter ways to do it. And it's not apparent if you're just looking at what's going on Instagram, on Twitter, wherever. It's not really apparent in all of that noise how to do it well. Most of those are giving you pretty crummy examples of what to do. So we will talk through that. Let's talk a little bit about who this is actually for. So we've been kind of all over the map and what we're talking about. Yes, we have big business examples, but this really is a small business owner podcast. I think of this for business owners who they are anything that we've been describing so far. So feeling at risk of burnout, right? Or maybe you clued into like, ooh, I think I'm one of those people that might be telling myself a couple little lies, right? Like we're all doing that to some extent. But maybe you clue in on that. Maybe you are one of those business owners, you're just out there hustling your butt off and you've had this thought that like, is there a better way or is that all made up? This is the place to come and find out. Like there is a better way is what I will tell you. So spoiler alert, there is a better way. And we're going to talk about lots of different ways to do that. There's not one silver bullet is the warning. You have to pay attention and learn in order to find your better way because everybody's scenario is different. So if you're out there hustling too hard, or maybe you're in a space where you're really worried about how much risk is involved in this small business endeavor. So you might be starting to hesitate a little bit. Or maybe you're trying to grow your business and you don't feel really confident in the moves you have to make. Like a great example that I run into a lot is small business owners who don't have any experience with hiring or managing staff. I think you and I have tons of experience with that we can really help people with. So I think that's if you're even thinking about that, or if you've thought about it and said, nope, I'm never going to do that, you should hang around because we can help you get good at that.
Absolutely.
Really important. It's not something you have to do. So I don't want people to feel like for my business to be successful, I must hire someone. But if you think you want to grow in that way, don't let your lack of knowledge or experience in it keep you from doing it. Those people should definitely listen to us. Also, I think business owners who want more long-term stability, like maybe you're in firefighting mode and you want to smooth things out and be able to like, because right now you're like, I can't keep running my business this way for the next 10 years. I will kill myself, right?
Yeah.
Some kind of long-term sustainability. Maybe you've tried some stuff in the past too that just didn't work for you. And so you're starting to get a little skeptical about, how this all works. There's some great programs and coaches out there. There's also some really bad, quick fixy stuff. And we'll talk more about that as well. Feeling like you don't know what you don't know, and yet you need to do something different. That's a really frustrating place to be. Like, I think that I should be doing something else. And I've been in this place and I'm like, I don't know what it is. I don't know enough right now to I don't know what I should do different, but whatever I'm doing now isn't working.
Oh man. Yeah.
That's a frustrating place to be in.
It's a horrible place to be. Yeah.
This is definitely a great place to learn and listen and start to close that gap on I don't know what I don't know. Business owners with big ideas that they cannot wait to pursue, but right now their business is too unpredictable or it's too burdensome for them to do it. So an example would be, I have small business owners who are like, I really want you to help me launch X business. But my current business, I tried to step out of it for like a month and let my employees run it. And it was a disaster. They tried to move on too soon, right? Because lots of business owners have this, like you're a serial entrepreneur and you're like, I launched this thing and now I want to launch this other line of this other service, this other whole business. Yeah. To get the stability of a business solid enough that you can then launch another one takes a lot more than we think it does. But it's also not as complicated as we might think it is. So if that's you, this is also a place where we can help you. And then finally, I think, if you're just tired of either listening to, I'll say the so-called experts, I'm not going to ever name any names, but there are lots of people out there who are parroting ideas about how to build a small business. They're doing it because they said, I did it and I can teach you too. That's not why I teach this. I want that to be super, super clear. I am not teaching you how to build a small business because I am a successful small business owner. That's not why I do this. I do this because I have learned what it takes to build a high-performing business from all of my past experience before I even started my business. So there's a lot of people out there that are telling you they can help you just because they did it. That does not make them an expert. Also, just because you can do a thing doesn't mean you can teach a thing.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's a huge mistake that people make too. So we're here because we are good at coaching people, at teaching people, written, delivered, long training courses on leadership development, on business performance. So that's why I'm doing this. So me being a small business owner helps me have an understanding now of how to translate things for small, because that's what I've been doing for myself. How do I translate everything that I learned in big business into developing my small business?
Yeah.
And now then teaching that to other small businesses. So that's really what we're about. And finally, I'll say, if you're also tired of listening to all these crazy, like unicorn business success stories is what I call them. Like it's that 1 in a million success story that it makes you feel bad. Right? We've all listened to them where they're like, oh, I guess I'm not really a very successful small business owner because that guy did like 3 times the revenue in half the time I have. So I guess I'm not very good at it. Like, it just makes you feel bad.
Yeah.
We're going to talk to other small business owners that are the normies, like all the people, all the normal business owners who are having normal success. That's who we're going to talk to, because too many of the stories out there are actually these 1 in a million, not relatable versions of business success. And it's kind of depressing. And I think we need to talk about what's really happening, because I see lots of really successful, happy business owners out there who are not that, but they're super happy where they're at and what they're doing. They don't have $1 million businesses because they don't need them and they don't want them. That's not what makes them happy. That's who we are all about. And did I miss anything? What do you want to add?
And I'll just make a comment about something that I knew but hadn't thought about in a while. It's just like, you made this transition to build your business, and you have so much knowledge about these topics in a large enterprise. Thinking about how you've translated your own lessons in big business into your small business and made it work for you. I definitely want to hear about that, because you're doing it, and you're a smart person. And you're very well organized and a clear thinker about this stuff. So I'm really curious to see what you've done yourself to take topics or frameworks that you've gotten from big enterprises and use them yourselves and slim them down.
Yeah, now that you say that, that might be a good topic for the future. I've spent more time than I want to admit working on those frameworks and mental models and trying to adjust them into this more simplistic and yet impactful sort of format. And I still keep changing it. Just yesterday, I was like, oh, you know what I need to change? Because I use it. And then I go, no, there's a better way for me to do it. And I keep changing it, which for me is actually what's fulfilling about what I do, is that I get to do that. And I don't have to ask anyone permission to change the entire framework of how I'm doing it and improve it. I get to do it and then deliver it to my clients and see how it works. And I love doing that. Okay, so let's talk about what we're going to talk about. So we've talked a lot about it already. You kind of are getting a feel for what we're going to talk about, maybe with many digressions, but we're going to talk about the fundamentals of running a successful business. And really from that perspective of taking big business world concepts, like how do big businesses do it? And how do we translate that into small business terms? So a lot of what you were just talking about, George, and just my experience in taking that and translating it down. We're going to be talking about those concepts and tools and how small business owners can benefit from that in a way that works for them, that is properly scoped to a small business. We're going to talk about the foundations for small business success. We're going to talk about business strategy. How do you do it? Why would you do it? How does a small business actually think about strategy? That might be a word you kind of want to run away from, but we want to teach you to embrace it. We're going to talk about how to turn your business into like running like a well-oiled machine by being more organized, having more processes that really support your business, and having the systems in place to do that. There's lots of simple things business owners can do that make a big difference. And this is a big one that I see for small business owners, where they just struggle with, they're just out there kind of winging it. And just a few tweaks in how they do things can really smooth things out. And this is going to be pretty realistic. Like, we're going to talk about real, tangible things people can do. I talk about micro moves. So what are the micro moves people can make that make a big difference? Because big change is not realistic. It can happen, but it's not the most realistic thing to go after, especially for long-term sustainable success, right? You've got to just keep making these micro moves to improve things.
Yeah.
And then finally, I think we will always end up bringing this back to, like we talked about in the beginning, there's always going to be a people aspect. We're always going to humanize this. Like it's about people at the most basic level, whether that's from a hiring perspective, or if you're not hiring, just from thinking about your business as one human serving another human, especially if you're just a solopreneur who's a coach or a consultant like I am. It's a very, very human business. So we'll always get to sort of how do you do that better? Because there are lots of improvements we can make there. I see lots of people struggle with how to be good managers, leaders of people, but also just how to have better interactions with their clients. So we'll talk a lot about that too. And this is what we're not about. We are not the Small Business Unicorn podcast, like I said before. We're not the VC funding podcast. That's somebody else. Lots of people have that covered already. We are also not the Manifest Your Millions podcast, which is basically like dream it, believe it, and it'll happen. We will talk about mindset, but in a different way from a leadership perspective, I would say. And we're not just going to be about the money or that destination. I mean, money is important because it's the sole reason your business exists, frankly. But we get too attached to the destination and we don't focus on the process in the moment enough.
Yeah.
And so we're not just going to be all about, making big dollars and making big goals all the time. And it's not going to be the hustle to win podcast. We're also not going to talk about the hustle. We're not going to talk about quick fixes. We're not going to do the thinking for you. So if you want us to just spoon feed you answers, you can stop listening right now because that's not what's going to happen. We're definitely going to give you actionable things to do, but you're going to have to show up here to basically learn how to be a better thinker. And so along those lines, like we're not going to give you growth hacks. We are going to give you a growth path, which I think is very different. Like there's a path for you to keep growing. Hacks are not the way we're going to do that. So what you will get are actionable tips, ideas to ponder, new skills, tools, and methods, how to be a more critical thinker. I think that's probably one of the most important things, and just be a better decision maker in your business. And like, I want people to come out of this podcast basically just feeling smarter about business. That's ultimately what I want them to be able to do. That's our aim. Our aim is to just, every time I want you to just feel just that one little notch smarter about how to run your business. And ideally, and this is your job, George, ideally, we're going to take some what are sometimes really boring topics and make them super entertaining.
I can guarantee that at some point you're going to hear questions you've never heard before. And that was going to help you be a more critical thinker, because you're going to hear something that, wow, I've just never really examined it from that angle. I've never heard that question before. And it'll get you thinking like a little earworm. You'll see.
I've talked about this already, so I'm just going to sort of sum this up, which is why I do what I do. I just see small business owners struggling with things that I wasn't struggling with. And I realized that I had all this benefit from my past experience in business. And once I recognized I knew things that they didn't know, and that there was really no good way for them to learn them, these fundamental things that business does and how they do it, how they operate well. When I realized nobody was really teaching that, they didn't have a good way to learn it. They couldn't learn from big business because it was too big and complicated. So it didn't make sense for them to just adopt, like you said, these complex strategic planning frameworks. That's not going to work for a small business. There's no way they could translate that. When I realized that they were missing, and some of it was very simple stuff, just how to set a good goal, how to just manage a basic project. They just didn't have any of these basic skills. And when I would just teach them a few things, it would completely transform their approach to their business. So it doesn't take a lot to make a big difference. So that's why I do what I do.
That's
and because it's also more fun, frankly. No offense, big business owners, if any of you are listening, but you guys are slow and complicated and difficult. And I think I have had my fill of coaching the big businesses because it's just kind of exhausting. I love working with a small business owner who, once I start to coach them and I start to consult them on where to go with their business, they light up, they take all of it in, they just become a sponge and then start taking action, and things change so quickly because it's just them making decisions about their business, and they can. I don't have to move this whole bureaucracy of a giant team of, leaders. who don't get along. So that's sort of the joy of doing all of this. And I hope that, George, you get to experience some of it by when we have guests on the podcast. You'll get to see how much fun it is when you're just working with this one other human running a business, and how much change you can create in them in just a little moment. Guests on this podcast are definitely going to get free coaching. I can tell you that right now. And that's part of what's coming. So we're going to be interviewing some guests, some small business owners, your everyday small business owner. We're going to be diving into all these topics together, having that big business to small business translation happening. We'll talk about leadership. We'll talk about mindset. We'll talk about systems. So I talk about these three components: clarity, systems, and mindset. So how do you get more clarity in business? How do you build better systems for your business? And how do you develop your mindset? And those are the three elements of performance when I talk about having a high performing business. We will talk about all of those things. And we also might provide recommendations, like maybe we'll do book reviews. We'll do some podcast reviews, because you can't learn from just us. I mean, we should be the most important place you learn.
Yes.
But we also will have other recommendations of where to learn it and maybe where not to learn from. I think there's a lot there that we can go into.
We're just going to have management stories from time to time I'll tell you about something that happened in my work. You will talk about it. You'll tell me, here's how I see this happening in a small business perspective. I'm really fascinated when I tell you some story and say, oh yeah, I see this happening in small business. I'm like, whoa. So how do you deal with that? There's going to be a lot of that stuff going on too. We'll just have fun.
And we might have an Avi story
that might happen
on occasion. For those who don't know, since we haven't really said it explicitly, Avi is George's son, my nephew. He's 6 years old. And that kid has some wisdom. So we're going to be learning some stuff from time to time from it. I know it's going to happen. You're going to be like, I got to tell you a story about it. You already did, talking about wanting to tell Avi about, lying. Yeah. So yes, he may creep in there.
He's a good kid.
And maybe Zoe, my rescue pup, will work in every once in a while. We'll see. All right. So we're going to wrap this up as our first episode. Congratulations to us for getting episode 1 out there. For those of you who heard even just a little bit, like, we're going to get better at this, of course. But if you heard just a little bit of something that you think might be interesting, your job right now is to subscribe. That's all you got to do. Just subscribe to the podcast so you can get them. They're going to come out weekly. And in our next couple episodes, we're just going to go into a deep dive on some of when we talk about belief shift, we're going to go into our core belief shifts that we're really going to talk about throughout this podcast. So we're going to take a deep dive, and that'll be a 2-parter for the next 2 episodes. So please return for that. But for now, subscribe. And we have an Instagram account now. So you can follow us on Instagram at The Belief Shift. Leave us comments, leave us ideas of what you'd like us to talk about.
Ask us questions whether we want them or not. Thanks for sharing the time with us.
This is going to be fun. Wait. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. You'll hear us next week.
See ya.